I thought we shared everything until I saw that balance. My name is Laura Green, 56, and Greg is my husband of 3 decades. By 7:15 in the morning, he was already gone for the day, leaving his coffee mug steaming on the kitchen counter beside yesterday's mail. Sunlight washed the porch rail and the white envelopes on the table. I sorted them the way I always do: utilities, insurance, the mortgage, coupons I never use. One envelope had a bank name I didn't recognize. It was addressed to him, but to our house. My hands hesitated, then tore it open because married life is supposed to be open. The numbers made my throat lock. It wasn't a small balance, not a rounding error or stray refund. It looked like a second life measured in dollars. I stood there with the page trembling and the mug cooling, and I felt a kind of slow heat climb up my neck. I thought of the bills I've trimmed and the plans I've delayed: new tires, dental work, the trip we kept promising for after retirement. Why would he hide money from me? I set a boundary the moment the front door clicked that night. I wouldn't pretend I hadn't seen it. I placed the envelope next to his dinner plate like a centerpiece no one could ignore. When he sat, he glanced at it, then at me, then at the corridor like the exit could solve this. I kept my voice even. "What is this account?" He swallowed. "It's nothing." "It has a balance." "Not much." I read the statement. "Then you misread it." I kept my hands flat on the table. "We have a joint life, a joint mortgage, a joint future we pay for month by month. If there's money, we plan it together." He leaned back and smiled in that careful way he uses on clients. "You wouldn't understand." That line was a cut meant to be small but deep. I felt the old routine tug at me. Smooth the moment, keep the peace, call it a misunderstanding, and stack tomorrow's groceries on top. But peace without truth is a debt that never stops growing. I pushed the envelope toward him. "Whose name is on it?" "Mine." "Is my name supposed to be missing?" "That's how I set it up." "Without telling me?" He reached for the mug, found it empty, set it down harder than he meant to. "You're making this into a drama. It's just savings. It's for the house." "For the house that needs a roof? For the card we pay down every month? For the doctor visit I put off because the copay is high?" I took a breath so I wouldn't shout. "How much is just savings supposed to be?" He chose silence, which told me enough. The page said a little under $50,000. That number had weight. It was the price of a new start or the cost of losing one. I thought about my mother's small estate, how I tracked every check to keep us steady after the funeral. I thought about the part-time job I picked up last winter when his hours dipped and ours felt tight. We have trimmed vacations to weekends, clipped discounts, argued over a broken dishwasher for 3 weeks. Meanwhile, there was this. "I need access," I said. "I need to see the transfers, the dates, the deposits." He laughed, a soft, practiced sound. "You don't need access to everything." "Then I withdraw consent for how we handle money from now on. We go through every account together. If there's another envelope like this, it comes to both of us." He stood, plate untouched. "You're overreacting." "Then show me I am." His face settled into the look he keeps for stalemates. He picked up the envelope and slid the paper back inside like he was putting away a tool. "We'll talk later." "Now." "I'm late." "For what?" "For work." "At this hour?" "No clients want to meet at night." He smiled again, but it was thin. "We'll revisit this when you've calmed down." The quick back and forth spat out like nails. "Why hide it?" "It isn't hidden." "Why no name?" "Easier this way." "Easier for who?" "For us." "For me or for you?" "Don't start." I felt the floor tilt, then steady as I chose my footing. I carried the empty mug to the sink and placed it down with care. "I'm not letting this go. If you won't show me, I'll go to the bank myself." He shrugged, like I'd threatened to return a sweater. "Do what you want." "Don't test me." He reached for his jacket. "You'll thank me later." There it was, The pressure, dressed as protection. The old trick that kept me quiet when we argued about taxes, or that loan he swore would pay itself. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't throw anything. I wrote the bank's name from the envelope on a sticky note and folded the statement into my purse. If the world was going to tell me a story about our money, I was going to read every line. By 9 o'clock the next morning, I planned to meet a clerk and ask simple questions. Was the account new? Who opened it? Could a spouse see transactions when the mail comes to the same address? I didn't need a fight. I needed daylight. The stake was plain. My trust, our future, and the roof that still leaked when the rain pushed hard from the west. Peace without answers costs too much. He pulled the door closed and let the latch speak for him. The house felt different, and not because he had left. It felt like a room where the lights were on and the furniture had shifted 1 inch while I slept. I looked at the envelope on the counter and the mug beside it, and I knew the line we had crossed wasn't small. He lied like it was routine. If he hid this, what else was buried? I tried to calm myself the way I always do on quiet evenings at home. I straightened the desk, stacked old tax folders, and lined up pens. I thought about the years we paid bills at the kitchen table, the small agreements that kept us steady, the unspoken promise that money would never be a weapon. I told myself this was a mix-up, maybe a bonus moved to the wrong place, maybe a transfer he forgot to mention. My fingers traced the edge of the desk and felt a thin burr in the wood where a stapler once dug a groove. I took a breath and promised to look, not accuse. Near midnight, when the house exhaled and the block went still, I walked to the home office. I opened the bottom drawer of the shared cabinet, the one that sticks if you pull too fast. The folders were neat, too neat, like someone had performed a cleanup only for what he wanted seen. I sifted through the stack, warranty slips, tax receipts, insurance renewals. Behind them, a slim ledger I hadn't touched in years. Tucked under it, an unlabeled folder. Inside, I found photocopies of transfers, one after another. Dates lined up in plain rows. The amounts weren't small. They were the size of postponed repairs and canceled trips. The worst page held a date before we paid my mother's funeral bills. I stared at the line until the numbers stopped blurring. If this was right, he moved her estate money away before we settled what we owed for the service. That detail landed like a stone in my chest. I placed the copies on the desk and checked the ledger for any notes that might explain the pattern. Nothing. Only old entries from years ago and blank lines after. I didn't need to decode anything. The dates said enough. The stake was simple. If he could move money when it mattered most, he could move it any time. And if I stayed silent, I would live on whatever story he found convenient. At 9 the next morning, I caught Janet outside, watering pots on her steps. "Can I ask you something?" I said. She set the hose aside. "Of course." "Did you ever see him go to the bank alone?" She paused, then nodded. "A few times. He looked tense. I thought it wasn't my business." "It's mine," I said. "I figured," she answered. "Are you all right?" "Not yet." She glanced at my hands, at the papers I held tight like a shield. "You want me with you when you ask?" "Not this time," I said. "But can I quote you if I have to?" "You can," she said. "I'll tell the truth." I thanked her and went back in. The drawer waited, half open. The ledger slid forward, as if daring me to pretend I'd seen nothing. I copied the pages, dated them in ink, and placed the originals back exactly as I found them. I would not be the messy one in this story. By the time he came home, the pages were on the table. He loosened his tie, checked his phone, then saw the stack. I kept my voice low. "Why are these transfers here? Why were they hidden?" He smiled with the easy charm he uses when he wants a room to follow him. "You're reading too much into old papers." "They're not old enough," I said. "Some are from last spring." "That was handled. Don't worry." "I am worried," he sighed. "You always worry." "Not like this." He tried stepping around the table, but I held my ground. We paid for the funeral after these dates, I said. Explain that. He shrugged. It was efficient. Money moved to where it did the most good. For who? For us? For me or for you? Don't turn this into a scene. I kept the next exchange tight and unblinking. Why copy these? I didn't. Who did then? You're confused. Show me the account. Not tonight. He reached for the stack. I laid my hand on top and felt the roughness of the paper. Leave them, I said. He straightened, softened his tone, and used the words meant to settle things. You're safe. I take care of us. If this is care, it's crooked. If this is care, it cost us dignity at the graveside. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't plead. I'm not guessing anymore. These pages say enough. He laughed quietly, as if the room were a child that needed soothing. You're being paranoid. My fear has a date and an amount. He spread his hands. Then what do you want? Access, clarity, every statement, every transfer, and the reason you kept this in a drawer. He hesitated, then went for the small performance he thinks erases facts. We're fine. You're tired. Sleep on it. If I sleep on it, I'll drown in it. He picked up his keys, stalled at the door, and gave me a look like this was all theater, and I'd missed my cue. You blow things out of proportion, he said. This is normal. Normal is telling the truth. I slid the ledger aside and held up the worst page. Normal is not moving money before we bury my mother. He stared, then chose the exit instead of an answer. We'll talk tomorrow. If you leave, I go to the bank, I said. He paused, calculating, then smiled the coldest smile. You'll thank me later. I didn't. I found the name that explained it all. I went to the courthouse annex just after lunch. The law clerk wore a blue lanyard. Under the desk lamp, the page she handed back showed faint grooves where a pen had pressed harder than mine ever would. The shape of my name looked right at a glance, but the lines were stiff, like someone copying from memory. She kept her words simple. A joint access form can move funds if both signatures appear, she said. If a spouse signed, even on a busy day, the bank considers it consent. I said I never signed anything for a new account. She nodded, then showed me the photocopy again, a single page with my name knotted beside his. You can challenge it, she added, but you'll need a specific reason. I have one, I said. This looks faked. She tapped the margin. Then describe how you normally sign. Her question steadied me. I told her the habits I've kept since school, the way the R lifts, the tiny tick at the end. None of that lived in the line on the page. She searched the tray and pulled a second document. The header printed a business name I knew too well, his sister's boutique. The transfer path ran from the estate account to that business, then into the account I found. The clerk only watched. This is the part that matters, she said. Who benefits? He said it was savings, I murmured. It looks like support, she said. You'll want a record of every movement. My boundary formed. I would not accept explanations without proof. I wrote dates on a note card. I wrote the boutique's name. I asked for a certified copy of the page that carried my name. She told me the fee, and I paid it, the bill slipping from my wallet like a small tax on waking up. The receipt felt thin but real between my fingers. I drove home with the copy on the seat beside me. The stake was plain. If I let this pass, I would have no say over the rest of my life. He was in the kitchen when I walked in, sleeves rolled. I set the page down. Explain this. He didn't touch it. What now? The form, I said. My name on it. It's routine paperwork. It's a signature. You signed. I did not. You must have. I slid the certified copy toward him, the seal dull against the paper. It routes to your sister's boutique. So what? She's drowning. It's family. It was my inheritance. He took a step closer, then stopped. You'd destroy her life for this? His words were soft but heavy. I won't be stolen from, I said. He finally picked up the page and stared at the strokes. He tried a laugh, kind. "You just don't remember." "I remember every bill," I said. "I remember the call from the funeral home. I remember the night we couldn't replace the dishwasher because we were tight. I remember the list on the fridge." He set the paper down, then reached for his glass. "This is nothing." "It's not nothing. It's consent you forged and money you moved." He watched me like I was a problem to solve. "Drop it." "No." "Think about the fallout." "I already did." He didn't raise his voice. He sharpened it. "Walk this back." "Here is my boundary," I said. "No more hidden accounts. No more secret transfers. I want full access now." He stared and chose cruelty dressed as care. "You're not thinking clearly." "I am," I said. The page lay between us, my name bent into a shape I never made, the boutique's name threaded through it. I could keep it as a warning, or cut the cord it tried to wrap around my throat. I tore the paper in half and walked out. Leaving didn't end it. It only began another kind of war. I moved into a small rental with one suitcase and a stack of bills. The manager counted the security deposit on the counter, one bill at a time, and added the first month's rent and a cleaning fee. When he slid the receipt over, the latch on the lockbox snapped shut behind him with a sharp metallic clink that followed me out to the parking lot. By noon, I was unpacking a few plates, a blanket, and a fear I could finally name. If I didn't guard what was left, I would have nothing to rebuild with. I drew a line that afternoon. I called the bank. I asked for a freeze on the secret account. The gatekeeper on the phone transferred me to a manager who tried to be kind and firm at the same time. "I can't restrict an account you're not on," she said. I asked how my mail came to our house if I had no rights to see it. "Mailing address doesn't prove ownership," she answered. I told her about the signature I didn't write. She paused, then said, "Dispute it in writing. File it today." "I need you to secure the funds," I said. "They're not safe." "I can't," she said, "but I can note the dispute. Note it and stamp the time." My phone buzzed while she typed. A message from him slid over the top of the screen like a shadow. "You'll regret crossing family." I kept my voice level. "Please repeat what you just said," I told the manager. She read back the time and her note. I saved her name and the case number in my phone because proof in this new life had to arrive as words you could repeat and a moment you could pin to a clock. I walked to the rental's narrow window and watched a boy pedal past with groceries strapped to his bike. Grocery money kept us honest for years. Now, it was the measure of how fast a lie could drain a home. When the manager finished, she added one more thing. "If you believe your name was used without consent, gather documents and consider a written complaint to the bank's fraud desk." "I will," I said. "Thank you." The phone felt heavy in my hand. I sat on the floor and mapped next steps, file the dispute, photograph the statement, keep every message. I opened a cheap paper notebook and wrote the date, the time, and 3 lines that mattered. Recover what's mine, protect what remains, prove the pattern. Stakes don't need fancy words. They need action you can carry into the next hour. Before dinner, I took a small box from the suitcase and set it on the counter. A pair of earrings, a bracelet I wore to anniversaries, a ring I stopped wearing when the knuckles got stiff. I told myself these were just things. The pawn shop turned them into cash for rent and groceries. The clerk counted out the bills while my stomach flipped. I folded the money into an envelope and wrote the month on the outside. This is breathing, I told myself. This is not defeat. My phone buzzed again. Another message. "You can still fix this. I saved it." I answered with one sentence. "We discuss every account or we're done." He replied with a question he hoped would undo me. "Since when do you make the rules?" I kept my reply short. "Starting now." I called a consumer attorney with good reviews and a tired voice. He listened, then said the work would take time and cost money I didn't have yet. "Collect every trace," he said. "Dates, names, amounts, and your memory while it's fresh. Don't argue with him. Don't warn him. Just build." "I already started," I said. "Good. Expect pushback." It already arrived. Night settled without comfort. I set my phone face up on the counter, screen dark, ready to catch whatever came next, and placed the lease receipt inside the lockbox I bought at the thrift store because even proof needs a home. Sleep didn't come easy, but resolve did. I was done pleading. I was keeping record. He emptied the joint account next. I never imagined betrayal could have receipts. The folder was heavier than I expected. Paper makes its own kind of sound when it carries guilt, soft, dry, and final. I sat in a paralegal's cubicle surrounded by files that spelled out the kind of crime no one likes to name out loud. Her desk lamp flickered once before settling into a steady glow. She pointed to the top page. "These signatures," she whispered. "They don't match." I leaned in, tracing the curves of my own name, copied and warped. My penmanship had always looped high, clean, steady. The ones on these pages leaned right, sharp, and impatient. He'd forged me over and over on mortgage updates, withdrawals, and transfers. Every page told me how deep the rot ran. I asked how far back it went. 2 years, she said, flipping another tab. He planned this. I felt the floor tilt, but I stayed seated. The lawyer's office charged by the hour, and time was money I didn't have to waste. "What happens next?" I asked. "We build a file," she said, "but this won't be cheap." The bill for legal review would drain what remained of my savings. Still, I nodded. Survival has a price, and sometimes it's printed on letterhead. I gave her my last retainer check, $200, and signed the receipt with the only signature that was mine. She handed me copies and said quietly, "Keep these somewhere safe. People who fake documents don't stop at one." When I left the office, I sat in the car and stared at the parking meter ticking down. I'd fed it quarters from the same coin pouch that used to pay for date-night dinners. Small money, but real. I thought of the years I'd trusted him with the big numbers while I handled the daily ones. It hit me then. The ledger of our marriage wasn't love and patience. It was debits and silence. By evening, an envelope arrived at the rental. A warning letter from his lawyer, sealed with confidence. It claimed I was spreading false accusations and damaging his reputation. The last line threatened legal action if I spoke publicly about family finances. I read it 3 times, then placed it beside the receipts that proved who the liar was. Fear came next, sharp and bright. If he was already weaponizing the law, I needed armor of my own. I started recording every call, every word, every apology wrapped in charm. I didn't tell him I was done being careful. When he called that night, his tone was syrup. "We can still fix this," he said. "Stop wasting money on strangers." "You mean lawyers," I said. "The ones who know how to read. You always twist things." "I don't twist. I verify." "You're making me the villain. You did that yourself." He laughed, short, humorless. "You'll see how this plays out." "I already am." He hung up, and I stood in the small kitchen, staring at the cheap wall clock. It was just past 8. The second hand kept moving even when I wished it would stop, like time collecting its own quiet evidence. I opened the folder again, spreading the forged pages across the counter. The light caught the ink, still slightly raised where his pen had pressed harder than mine ever would. I pressed my fingers to the edge of the paper until it bent. Proof has a texture. It's both fragile and sharp. The paralegal had said something before I left her office that I hadn't wanted to hear. He's methodical. Don't underestimate people who fake with purpose. I didn't anymore. I was out of patience and nearly out of money, but I wasn't out of proof. That mattered more than anything he could withdraw. Silence, I realized, helps the guilty breathe easier. And I was done supplying air. When I set the folder back in the lockbox, my pulse slowed to a steady rhythm. I wasn't the fool anymore. I was the record keeper. He called me a thief before I ever spoke. He turned our neighbors into his jury. By the end of that week, whispers carried faster than mail. Janet came by one morning, holding her coffee in both hands like it might keep her steady. "You should know," she said. "He's been talking." I waited. "He says you're not well, that you've been confused." Her voice broke. "People believe him." I felt the air tighten. In a small neighborhood, gossip spreads quicker than any letter. The sound of a lawnmower from across the street filled the pause between us. I forced a half smile. "He's efficient," I said. She shook her head. "You don't deserve this." By noon, I saw what she meant. The mailman slid a bundle into my box. 3 envelopes, 1 flyer wedged between. Greg's business logo printed across the top, the words "Family Values" in bold. But someone had crossed out the tagline and scribbled, "Ask his unstable wife." My name. My handwriting copied poorly in red marker. The sight made my throat burn. Humiliation is quiet until it isn't. I stood at the curb staring at that fence dividing our properties. It looked the same, but everything had changed. He was rewriting me in public ink. I wanted to shout the truth, but shouting only makes liars sound calm. So I planned differently. That evening, Janet stopped by again. "He's talking to the church board," she said. "Told them you've been calling banks at night about imaginary thefts." I laughed without humor. "Imaginary? That's creative." "He's painting you as paranoid," she whispered. "You need someone credible on your side." "I will," I said. "Someone who can read numbers better than rumors." On Sunday, I went to service early. The church smelled faintly of wax and old paper. Familiar, grounding. A retired accountant named Henry sat near the back, the kind of man who watches before he speaks. I remembered Janet mentioning he'd handled small business audits years ago. I sat beside him after the benediction and said quietly, "I need advice about financial records." He looked at me, then nodded. "Bring what you have. I'll look. No promises, but I'll look." That small word felt like shelter. When I left, 2 women at the door paused their conversation as I passed. One whispered, the other pretended not to hear. I didn't flinch. Let them talk. Truth walks slower, but lasts longer. Back home, my phone buzzed with a message from him. "You're embarrassing yourself. People are worried." I stared at it, fingers hovering. Then I typed, "If they worry, they should ask why." He read it, didn't reply. That night I heard faint laughter from the next yard. His sister visiting, voices carried by the still air. I couldn't make out the words, but I caught my own name, softened by distance, then followed by silence. I shut the window. Janet texted not long after. "He's going to drop something new tomorrow. Be ready." I sat on the couch and let the quiet settle. The mug in my hand had gone cold. In its reflection, the kitchen light looked dimmer than usual. Or maybe I was just noticing what's always been there. The slow fade before something burns out completely. At 7:30 the next morning, I walked outside and found another flyer pinned to the community board near the corner store. Same logo, same handwriting, only this time the message read, "Beware who you trust. Some people invent crimes to hide guilt." My stomach turned. He wasn't just protecting himself, he was building a wall of fiction around me. Janet joined me there, her face pale with anger. "This is sick," she said. "He's losing control." I looked at the flyer again. "No," I said softly. "He's tightening it, for now." But even lies have a shelf life. I folded the flyer carefully, slid it into my bag with the others, and walked back home. If he wanted to turn neighbors into witnesses, fine. I'd give them evidence they couldn't ignore. That afternoon, I called Henry. "I'm bringing the files tonight," I told him. "He's clever with numbers, but not careful." Henry's calm voice steadied me. "Bring copies. Originals stay with you." For the first time in weeks, I felt something like balance. Proof beats rumor. Paper outlasts talk. The stakes were clear. If I didn't fight the story he was spreading, the world would decide who I was without asking. As evening settled, the street looked normal again. Kids playing, porch lights flickering on, neighbors nodding politely. But every glance carried weight now, every smile a test. The fence between my yard and his stood tall, ordinary wood painted white, but it might as well have been steel. Still, I held the folder close and whispered to myself, "Facts, don't whisper back." Janet found his next lie before he did. The figures told the story he couldn't bury. Henry spread the pages across his dining table and slid a calculator toward me. The paper rustled as he lined up each sheet under the lamp, columns neat as rails. I watched his pencil tap once, then stop. He had circled names that looked like suppliers, but the addresses were empty lots, and the phone numbers didn't ring anywhere. The receipt roll from his adding machine curled at the edge like a sleeping snake. "These suppliers don't exist," he said. "How sure are you?" "I checked cross-listings. I searched old directories. Nothing. And look here." He pointed to a transfer that began in the account tied to my mother's estate, moved through a shell invoice, then landed in the account with the bank logo I'd never seen before. "That's not sloppy," he said. "That's deliberate." I gripped the table to steady my hands. "Can the bank claim it's a mistake?" He shook his head. "Not with this pattern. The dates line up to avoid routine checks, end of month, holidays, times when people aren't watching." I stared at the total he'd penciled at the bottom. "That number could fix a life." "It could," he said. "It did, just not yours." I felt anger rise like heat inside a closed room, but I kept my voice calm. "Will you put this in a report?" "Yes," he said. "Tonight. I'll print 2 copies, one for your lawyer, one for you." "What will it cost?" "Nothing," he said. "I'm retired. This is pro bono. I don't like thieves." The word hit clean and true. I nodded and wrote the time in my notebook, 4:45, because every decision needed an anchor. If I forgot later, the clock would remember for me. We worked quietly for another hour. He made notes, drew arrows, stapled trails. I read aloud lines I couldn't bear to read silently. He looked tired but steady. When he finished, he slid the stapled report toward me. "Carry this like you would your passport," he said. "Lose everything else before you lose this." I folded the receipt roll and the report into my bag and thanked him. On the way home, I stopped at the corner store to load cash onto a prepaid card for rent and groceries. It wasn't much, but it was mine, and no one could empty it with a smile. The clerk handed me the activation slip, and for a flicker of a second, I felt lighter. Proof and a plan beat charm and a threat. I called my lawyer from the car. "I have an audit," I said. "Real proof. Fake suppliers. Transfers that route to his sister's store." He went silent, then said, "Bring it first thing. This changes everything." I set the bag on the passenger seat like it was a person I needed to protect. Back at the rental, I placed the report in the lockbox and spun the dial until it clicked. My shoulders loosened. Proof has weight, but it also lends spine. He was waiting when I got inside. Outside the building, near the stairs. He stepped from the shadow like a man who believed he owned the daytime. "We need to talk," he said. "No," I said. "We need to document." "Don't be cute. I'm busy." He moved closer, measuring the distance like a surveyor. "You're ruining us. You did that yourself. This is family. You stole from family." He lowered his voice, trying to reach the part of me that used to smooth his temper. "You're confused." "I'm done with confused." He changed tactics, quick as breath. "Put the records away. We'll fix it privately." "Privately is how you built it." "You don't know what you're doing," he said. "I can read numbers. They mean nothing without context. I have context. I have names that lead nowhere and invoices that buy silence." He smiled then, soft and dangerous. "You don't have the whole picture." "I have enough." I took my phone out, not as a threat, but as a witness. He saw it and laughed. "You're recording now? Cute." "This is not cute," I said. "This is a boundary." "What boundary?" "No more lies. No more surprise withdrawals. I will use the report, and I will tell the truth." He stepped back and looked up at the windows, at the place where neighbors might be. For the first time, I saw the mask slip. He wasn't worried about me. He was worried about the people who might hear. I let the quiet sit there so he could feel it. He broke the silence with a sneer. "You think a retired bean counter can beat me?" "I think the paper can," I said. "Paper tears. Courts read." He blinked. A small victory, but a real one. I opened the door to the stairwell and spoke in a level tone. "We're done talking without witnesses." He tried one last pressure point. "Drop this, and I'll fill the joint account again. That money is not a gift, I said. It's proof. His mouth tightened. You really want war? You already started it. He stared at me like he was choosing a weapon. I didn't flinch. I held the phone where we could both see it, not high, not low, just present. Then I stepped inside and let the door close gently, the soft latch loud as a verdict. In the quiet of the apartment, I sat on the edge of the bed and let my hands shake. I was scared, but I wasn't small. I pulled the bag into my lap and felt the solid corner of the report under the fabric. Tomorrow, I would carry it to my lawyer. I would sign my name and tell the simplest truth in the room. Accounts move, but consequences travel faster. The phone buzzed once. A new message, short, ugly, meant to bruise. He swore he'd destroy me first. He filed before I could breathe. The envelope landed on my doormat just after 9. Thick paper, dark ink, a raised seal that scraped my thumb as I turned it over. I knew what it was before I opened it. A summons carries its own weight, like a bill you can't ignore. My chest tightened, but I slit the edge and read. He was suing me for defamation and a property claim, the language swollen with pretty lies. He said I'd damaged his livelihood. He said I'd spread stories. He said I'd made up theft. I took the envelope to my attorney and set it on his desk. He slid a paperweight over the pages so they wouldn't curl. I'm not surprised, he said. This is pressure, not truth. I nodded, but truth doesn't pay filing fees. He talked me through the steps, the response on the calendar, the costs I would carry to stand still. I did the math in my head and came up short. By noon, I had a decision. I sold my car. The dealer counted bills and tapped numbers on a screen. The offer was low but quick. I signed the transfer and watched the keys leave my hand. The money went straight to the retainer and a small cushion for rent and groceries. Losing the car felt like losing a shield, but walking beats drowning in debt. When I called him from the sidewalk, he answered on the second ring, voice smooth as glass. You got my letter? It's a lawsuit. It's a lesson. For who? For you. It's a lie. It's consequences. I kept my tone steady. Withdraw it. Admit you were wrong. I wasn't. Then prepare to pay. I ended the call before the anger could run me. The stakes were clear. If I bowed, I lost myself. If I fought, I bled money but kept my name. I chose the costly path. Silence is more expensive. At the office, my attorney drafted our response. He read aloud so I could hear each word land. We will deny defamation and counter on fraud grounds after discovery. We will attach the audit, the dates, and your recorded call. His voice was calm. Mine wasn't. What can he take from me? I asked. Time, money, nerve? He said. Not the facts. He slid a schedule across the desk. Be ready for deadlines. Miss one, and his story wins. A clerk brought in a copy stamped with the court seal. It pressed faint ridges into the page. I ran my finger across it and felt the truth of institutions. Cold, simple, slow. He encouraged me to breathe. You're not alone, he said. You have evidence and a witness. I nodded, thinking of Henry's report and Janet's memory, 2 anchors in a storm built out of charm. That evening, I emptied the glove compartment I no longer owned and poured the last quarters into a jar on my counter. Coins for laundry, cash for bread. I kept the receipt from the sale under a magnet, not as a trophy, but as a promise that money wouldn't make my decisions for me. I brewed cheap coffee in a chipped mug and watched steam rise like a quiet vow. My phone rang at 8:10. Unknown number. I answered and heard a polite voice from his lawyer's office. We encourage settlement, the woman said. Retract and apologize and we'll discuss costs. I said, I won't retract a fact. She exhaled like I'd missed a bargain. Then you'll face consequences. So will he, I said, and ended the call. In the morning, I signed our response and watched the courier seal the envelope. He peeled the strip and pressed it down with his thumb. The sound was truly final. My attorney marked the calendar, looked at me. Hold your ground. I did. The hearing date was set for July 12th. I didn't plan to catch him confessing. He came back angry, boots hard on the steps, fist on the door like a hammer. I held the phone low and tapped record. The hallway carried every sound. If I reacted, he would shape the scene. If I listened, he might hand me what the papers promised. He shouted before I could speak. "Open up! We're done playing games." I didn't move. The doorframe shook once, then twice. "Coward," he said, voice rising. I kept the phone steady. The microphone caught breath and anger. I let silence do work that arguments never could. When I turned the latch, I left the chain on. He leaned close to the gap. "You think you'll win?" "I think facts stand," I said. "You think people care?" "They will when they see." He laughed. That money was never hers to keep anyway. It was wasted on her guilt. I closed my eyes and let the words land. He had finally said what the transfers only hinted. He kept going, hungry to hurt. "I moved it because you never would. You sit and make lists. I act. I saved the store. I kept us afloat." "You kept her afloat," I said. "Not us." "Same thing." "It isn't." His face flushed. "You want it back? Earn it." "I already did." The short lines ran out of him. He tried a new shape. "Take the flyers down. Tell the church you lied. Retract everything, and maybe I'll consider—" "No. You'll run out of money. I'll run out of patience first." He slammed the door with his palm and walked away, muttering. When the stairwell swallowed his steps, I stopped the recording. The room felt oddly still, like a chair left spinning after someone stands up. I set the phone beside that chair and stared at it. Proof, with sound. The stake was simple. If this held, he would not control the story anymore. I texted my attorney. "Can you talk now?" He called within minutes. I pressed play and held the phone to my ear. We listened to the clatter, then the sentence that mattered. He let out a breath. "That's an admission," he said. Plain meaning. He tied the inheritance to the transfers and motive. "Will it count?" I asked. "It will." "What next?" "We preserve it. I'll prepare a notice. We'll produce a transcript. Keep the original backed up. Forward a copy. Tell no one else until I file." I sat at the small table and wrote the time across a sticky note, 6:20, so the moment wouldn't blur. I saved the audio to 2 folders and sent copies as instructed. Then I listened once more, not to enjoy it, but to learn its edges. The quality was clear, the words were cruel. He believed cruelty was power. By nightfall, I walked the block to steady my hands. Streetlights hummed. In a storefront window, a pair of discounted mugs sat beside a sale sign. I had counted coins and sold a car to survive his pressure. Now a sentence might balance the cost. He texted me again, 3 in a row. "Delete it. Stop recording me. You're done." I replied with 6 words. "You spoke. I saved the truth." Sleep came fast. In the morning, my attorney called. "I filed the notice," he said. "We'll ask the court to admit the audio. Expect noise from his side." "Noise I can live with." He paused. "This is your turning point." I looked at the chair, at the phone resting on its seat like a small witness. I know. For once, the day felt light. I made coffee, ate toast, and smiled when the email confirmation arrived. The chain of lies had been loud. My proof was louder because it was simple. I didn't have to argue anymore. I had to let him speak. The judge would soon hear his own words. My voice shook, but I didn't look away. The clerk swore me in, and the room made its own sound, a thin echo that turned every word into metal. Even the scrape of a chair traveled to the back row. I could hear my pulse and the whir of the ceiling vent. Across the aisle, he sat beside his lawyer, jaw tight. I kept my eyes on the bench, on the woman who would decide what mattered. I told the truth, in clean lines. I moved out. I found transfers. I learned my name was used without consent. I brought an audit. I recorded his confession. Each sentence placed a brick where panic used to be. The judge nodded once, then lifted a hand to the speakers. The recording played. His voice filled the courtroom, strong at first, then thin as the sentence turned on him. That money was never hers to keep anyway. It was wasted on her guilt. A murmur moved through the gallery. I didn't turn. I watched the judge's face, the way listening changed her posture. Papers rustled. Somewhere a pen tapped twice, then stopped. The lawyer for his side tried to sand the edges. "Out of context," he said. "A private dispute between spouses." The judge looked over her glasses. "He identified the inheritance and the use," she said. "Context seems plain." He tried again. "She's unstable. The neighborhood—" "Stop," the judge said. "We are not trying a rumor." He leaned back, but the mask stayed on. Charm is patient when it thinks it can outlast you. I felt the urge to apologize, and then let it die. This wasn't a scene. This was a ledger catching up to a lie. My attorney rose and kept it simple. "We ask the court to accept the audio and to open a formal inquiry into forgery and fraud, given the forged signature exhibits and the audit linking transfers to a related business." He did not reach for drama. He reached for dates. He reached for the one thing that survives spin. Paper read aloud. The judge turned to me. "Do you wish to add anything?" I stood straighter. That was my life he was spending. Silence settled like weight. For a breath, it felt like applause I couldn't hear. Then she spoke again. "The audio is admitted." He stood, angry. The spikes came fast. "This is biased. The facts are clear. She's lying. I'm not. You'll regret this. I already paid." I sat down, hands flat on my skirt. The stakes were simple. Lose my name, or pay what I must to protect it. I'd sold a car, counted quarters, and learned the price of resolve. Let him learn the price of fraud. The judge conferred with the clerk, then addressed both tables. "There will be a formal inquiry into fraud and forgery. You will exchange discovery. You will preserve all financial records, including statements and invoices. Any destruction will be treated as sanctionable." Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Authority doesn't shout. It writes, firmly. From the back row, a woman whispered, "Good," and a man exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for weeks. I didn't look to see who they were. I kept my eyes on the bench and the gavel resting near her hand, quiet as a promise. He tried one more angle. "This will ruin my business." My attorney answered before I could. "Honest books don't fear light." The judge gathered the filings. "We reconvene next month. Counsel, meet with the clerk. Parties, you are bound by the schedule." I thought of the years spent keeping peace with receipts and patience. Peace had been a loan I paid alone. Would he ever admit that? The judge lifted the gavel. Greg's face fell, pale as chalk, and for once he had no words. The gavel struck like closure I hadn't earned yet. He ran out of lies before I ran out of proof. 1 week after the hearing, the morning paper waited on the step at 7:05. The front page carried a bold headline. Under it, a photograph of the courthouse steps, gray stone and a blur of faces. The black ink looked wet in the sun. I read the words that matched what I had lived. "Husband, charged in estate fraud." My phone buzzed until the counter filled with messages. Some were apologies, some were gossip. Janet texted first. "Proud of you. Coffee later?" I wrote back yes. Then a number I didn't recognize called, and I answered because truth had momentum now. "Good morning," the woman said. "This is Claire with the Ledger. I'm writing the follow-up. Would you like to comment?" I glanced at the photograph again, at the caption that named dates instead of rumors. "1 sentence," I said. "Make sure the story names the inheritance for what it was. My mother's last gift." "That's fair," she said. "We have the filing and the audio admission. People should know the timeline." She paused. "How are you paying for all this?" "I sold a car. I used savings." "Then I'll note the cost," she said. "Justice is never free." The calls kept coming. The bank manager left a message confirming my complaint would be re-reviewed under the inquiry. Henry laughed on voicemail and said, "Numbers don't lie. People do." I didn't need a bulletin board. The front page had done the work. By noon, Greg's sister called. Her voice shook. "He said it was for the business. He said you agreed." "I heard him say different," I replied. "He told me you were unstable." "I recorded him." Silence. Then small sounds that might have been regret. "He's my brother." "He was my husband," I said. "The paper shows what he did. He used grief like a bank." "That store kept 3 people employed," she whispered, "and he kept me small." "I'm sorry," she said at last. "Me too." I sat with that for a while. Forgiveness isn't a coupon. It doesn't erase the charge. But the admission loosened a knot I'd carried since the first envelope. I looked again at the photograph, tiny faces turned toward the bench, and felt the room from that day settle into my chest, steady and cool. In the afternoon, I met Claire at a cafe. She brought a recorder and a copy of the paper folded to the story. "A few details," she said. "You can pass on any." I told her about the audit, the prepaid card that kept me afloat, the nights I counted quarters. She listened like a judge, not for drama, but for edges. "What do you want people to understand?" she asked. "That theft can look polite," I said. "That charm can cost your life." I added the stake that still mattered. "If we let this slide, it will be open season on widow's money and anyone who trusts signatures." She nodded. "We'll run the follow-up on Sunday." She pointed to the photograph. "Would you mind if we used a picture? Just you at the courthouse door." "Use the bench instead," I said. "The story isn't my face, it's the gavel." When I got home, a grocery receipt sat under my magnet, next to the headline I'd clipped from my file. Small things together can build a wall you can lean on. My account alert showed a refund from court fees. Small. Real. The neighbor boy waved from his bike. His mother gave a short nod, the kind that says we saw what we needed. My phone vibrated once, then again. New messages stacked like cards. The top preview made my skin prickle. Unknown number. 4 words, plain and mean, sitting there like a trap door ready to open. Then came his final message, 4 words I'll never forget truly. He wrote like he was rewriting history. The envelope arrived 2 weeks after the verdict. Heavy for its size. My name spelled in tidy loops that never matched the way he spoke. I stood at the counter and turned it over once, then again, searching for a return address that wasn't there. I told myself I could ignore it. I also knew I wouldn't. I lit a candle from the drawer and touched the wick with a match. The room held the faint, bitter scent of burnt wax, close and old, like a church after a service. The smell steadied me. It said, "Begin." He started with excuses. I wanted control, not cruelty. Then came weather, stress, the market, his sister's store, even the cost of keeping up a home he wouldn't leave. He wrote about pressure like it was a storm that picked him up and made him sign my name. He never wrote the word choice. He folded kindness around blame. "You were distant. You never liked my family. You didn't understand business." I read each line the way a banker reads a loan file. Dates first, then numbers, then signatures. His story failed the math. Money left before arguments began. Transfers moved on Mondays at 9, like a shift he worked alone. He didn't lose control. He scheduled it. He asked for privacy, then hinted I should correct what people think. "We both made mistakes," he wrote. "Say that and we can move on." Move on to what? An apology without repair is a coupon that expired years ago. I laid the pages flat and let silence do the talking. There was one sentence that caught me. I used the inheritance to stop our life from sinking. Our life. I remembered selling my car to pay the retainer. I remembered counting bills for rent, choosing cheap bread, telling the pharmacist I needed the generic and watching the total drop by a few dollars that still mattered. He called it saving us, while I learned what leaving costs in cash and sleep. My phone buzzed once. Janet asked if I was all right. "Reading," I wrote back. "Finishing," she replied with a heart, then left me to it. I took a breath and traced the indent of his ballpoint where he pressed too hard on my name. Habit betrays hands as easily as voices betray men. I wanted to send a single sentence. "Return what you took." The court had already ordered restitution, a plan set on paper with dates he could not charm. But the letter wasn't about debt. It was about setting the story he preferred. He asked me to be gentle with him in public. I decided to be exact instead. He anticipated that. If you go soft, I can make repairs in peace. Soft is how paper tears. I chose steady. I slid his pages into the file that holds my audit, the recording, the notice from the bank. I wrote on a sticky note, "Closed." He had added a postscript, "I still love you." 6 words trained to do a lot of work. I looked at the candle, the small pool forming around the wick. Love pays what it owes. Love signs its own name. "Meet me," he wrote near the end. "No lawyers, no recording. Just us." "No," I said to the room. "Coward," I imagined him spitting. "Boundaries aren't fear," I answered. "You'll regret this." "Not anymore." I folded the file and set it back in the drawer next to the spare keys. The apartment clock clicked toward morning. Dawn would arrive either way, with or without my permission. I rinsed a cup, wiped the counter, and let the candle burn lower, steady and honest about how much was left. The restitution schedule listed monthly amounts, not mercy there. Some stories need endings, not rewrites. I burned the letter at dawn. Justice doesn't pay what it owes. The notice hit my phone before sunrise, a small chime that made the room feel less heavy. My lawyer's name filled the screen, then one clean sentence, "Funds cleared." I opened my banking app with hands and waited as the spinning circle argued with my breath. The number appeared, not whole, not generous, but mine. "Partial," he said when I called back. "Ordered and executed." I asked how much of the order was still pending. He told me the figure and the schedule. It wouldn't fix the years he shaved off my sleep, but it would cover rent, food, and the last attorney invoice. It would let me decide things again without begging the calculator for mercy. I sat quiet for a moment, hearing the kettle bump once on the stove, a soft tap that told me it had cooled. I thought about the first time I sold my necklace to make that initial retainer. I remembered counting bills at the counter, palms damp, and the way the clerk avoided my eyes. Money has a memory, even if people pretend it doesn't. At 6:40 a.m., I walked to the small table by the window and took out my bank card. The edges were scuffed from months of saying no. I ran a thumb over the numbers like I could smooth the last year flat. Then I wrote one promise on a scrap of paper. Never again is paid for in cash and boundaries. I called the reclaimed furniture yard on Maple, where the old garden bench ended up after the move. The owner remembered me. "You were the one with the map of nail holes," he said. I laughed. "I am." He read the price back to me, and I said yes without bracing. Not because I needed wood and screws, but because I needed a place to sit that didn't apologize. "Delivery by noon?" "That works." "Signature on drop-off?" "Mine," I said, and smiled at the slip of power in that single word. I printed the transaction page and slid the fresh sheet behind the other papers in my file. A crisp receipt, still warm from the tray, sat on top like proof that repair can be ordinary. I didn't frame it. I didn't post it anywhere. I just let the page cool and told myself this: stakes are simple now. Stay solvent, stay steady, stay free. The spikes came anyway, quick and bright. "Come back." "No. I'm changing. Pay what you owe." He didn't answer. Silence chose its own side. Janet texted, asking whether I'd eaten. "Toast and an apple," I wrote, "and a plan." She sent an invitation for dinner, the kind that doesn't need a reply because it's decided. I told her I'd bring a salad and a story with no villains, only receipts. By noon, the truck rolled up. 2 men carried the bench through the gate and set it on the patch of grass I keep alive. One handed me a clipboard. I signed, then tapped the card on his reader. A beep. Done. I watched them go and let my shoulders lower by an inch I hadn't noticed. I sat. The wood creaked, familiar as an old friend who keeps your secrets. I set the phone on the armrest and let the sun touch my face. I didn't need to measure the cost of a minute anymore. I could spend one. "If I don't rebuild now, I may never feel safe," I said to the empty yard. Saying it out loud made it true enough to hold. The day slid forward, ordinary and dear. I brewed coffee and carried the cup outside. I listened to the street, to a bike chain ticking somewhere, to a child's laugh. Peace doesn't bill by the hour. It arrives, small, confident, if you leave the gate open. I kept one receipt, for peace. Some mornings, I still count envelopes. The porch rail holds a small stack, soft corners, no threats. I touch each one and laugh at myself. Habit takes longer to heal than paper cuts. A light breeze moves the first page, cool against my wrist, like the day nudging me forward. Months have passed. The case sits in a folder I rarely open. I keep the bench by the back fence, boards sanded smooth. At sunrise, the yard looks honest. I sit there and let my breath match the quiet. Here is where I add my life back without asking permission. On the step, I sip coffee and watch gray trade to gold. I used to fear the mail, every letter a trap that turned rent into panic. Now I open only what belongs to me. Utilities, a plain bank statement, a small refund from court costs, credited without drama, enough for groceries and soap without counting pennies first. I keep a notebook on the bench and write clear lines. Today, I decide what stays, I write. Today I spend on peace. The numbers are plain, not a threat. Automatic transfer to savings set for the first. Retainer paid off. No more cash advances. I refuse to barter away my calm. He still texts sometimes, reaching through a door I keep locked. We can make it right. Think about the family. Let's talk without lawyers. Last time, you owe me everything. My chest tightened, then loosened. I set the phone down and heard the wind move through the hedge like a warning that wasn't unkind. Stop, I said into the morning. I'm not a ledger. The world didn't change, but something settled inside me. Pride isn't payment. Love isn't collateral. Marriage wasn't a line of credit I must carry. I won't fund another person's story with pieces of my own. A neighbor boy pedaled past and waved. I waved back and noticed the bench again, how steady it felt under me. It used to belong to a house that never protected me. Now it belongs to a yard that does. Owning it twice feels like buying back a year at a fair price. By late morning, I sorted the envelopes and kept two. One was a note from the legal aid clinic, a thank you for returning copies. I smiled and slipped it into the folder marked closed. The second was a blank card I'd ordered. I had plans for that one. I opened my diary and wrote the question I carried from the worst nights. Who was I without the money fights, the frozen accounts, the lies that billed me for believing? The answer was simpler. I was the person who kept the lights on. I was the person who paid the fee and kept the date. I chose the porch at sunrise over the kitchen at midnight. The spikes came, sharp and clean. Come back. No. Forgive me. Repair it. Halfway? Full truth. The air steadied. I steadied with it. At noon, I sat on the bench and opened the blank card. I wrote a single sentence and read it aloud. Peace is a payment I can afford. Then I tucked the card inside my diary and signed beneath it. My hand didn't shake. The signature looked like mine again. I closed the diary and flattened the page. I didn't tear, burn, or send anything. I left the card where it could remind me that settling balances isn't the same as settling for less. The sun climbed. The yard was bright and ordinary. Some mornings I still count envelopes, but only to prove there's nothing left to fear. The bench holds. The sunrise returns. The future feels paid in full, not because I won, but because I refuse to sell myself for less than my name. I breathe, slow and steady now. And this time, I signed my own name. Did you enjoy this story? Tell me which city you're listening from. I read every comment. If the story touched you, you can support the channel with a super thanks, so I can keep bringing more stories like this every day. Your encouragement really helps. I'd love to hear your thoughts and what moment stayed with you. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's plenty more on the channel as well. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. See you in the next life story with respect and gratitude.